remix contest. Finally, we're able to do one in collaboration with Tiesto's Musical Freedom and Spinnin' Records of my latest song Tell Me a Lie, which sounds like this. You can find a link to the contest in the description below. Here are the prizes. I tried to make them as usable and hopefully interesting as possible instead of like a gift card to some software company or something like that. But you can find all the vocal stems on the contest page, and as always, I'm giving away all the samples from the song, which you can also find in the description. By the way, these are my Amsterdam dance event shows if you're going, and as always, one of the first 500 commenters will win a free mastering done by me. Make sure you're following me on Instagram because I'm going to give away some extra help for the remix contest very soon. But this was a super long intro, I'm sorry, I'm gonna shut up now, let's dive into it. So this is the project file, it's very messy, but I'm gonna do my best to explain everything. Fun fact about this song, it actually started off as a collaboration with Brooks in like 2016, 2017, when I lived in the city that he lives in the Netherlands for a while, and we just made a lot of music together. This track ended up not sounding right for a collaboration, so we decided that I'd just finish it and release it for my own project, and we then made another song, as you know, which is called Riot. The problem is that since it's from 2016 or 2017, I only have the stems. But since it was from like 2016, I had to go back to my parents' place and find my old computer and bounce out stems. So sadly, I can't explain like the bass and synth too much, but can at least show you. So this is how the bass sounds. I remember that the main layer was made from Reactor's Razor and the Zapping Pork preset. This is what we used. And I don't know how we ended up with this, but sounds like another layer on top, but it's pretty much just that going off the modulation. And for the synths, sadly we don't have all the individual sounds, but this is how it sounds. I think it's 2 layers from Spire and then another horn or something that adds that touch to it, but the rest of the song I can hopefully explain a lot better. The kick is actually the I Don't Speak French kick, which sounds like this. It's just pitched and EQ'd heavily and distorted a bit. This is how the original sounds. As always, you can download all of these samples in the description. And then we have this super wide clap that is only to each side, so it just adds that spark because we have a mid layer here that we had from the 2016. And we have this, and together the claps sound like that. It doesn't sound too good on its own, I think, but in the whole mix it sort of worked. For the sub, it's as always the punch in the balls from Reactor Razor. But the bass line goes down to a C sharp, so I add an extra reactor which has an octave higher, and I EQ them out so that the top layer only plays that octave, only here, so that they don't interfere with each other. And it can help a lot to do 2 octaves when you go below like D sharp till A sharp pretty much, because then you can lose a lot of power instantly. So that's a nice trick. And I cut out the volume of the subs here in between the breaks, just to make it a bit more bouncy. So the rhythm and the melody is very stale. It's like bum, 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 bum. So to switch it up a bit, I have these things going in between. As I said, drop out the sub and then add these larger claps. And this thing. You can find all these samples below as always. Having that on each ending really helps with drive the record forward. And they're different each time to keep it interesting. And I have this one as well. Doing these sort of cinematic like swells and stuff, they can be a bit boring to do, but it adds a lot. This white noise just pans around. Just automated the panning so that it gradually increases. And we have this white noise here. Which is cut up and automated so that it matches with the lead. So it sounds more natural, but it obviously took a bit time to get it just right. But as I said, these things matter a lot in the bigger picture. Oh, and having these reverses, reverse bass and reverse synth helps a lot. We also had that going in here. To help create some unique character in the drop, I added these flute things. That go through the entire drop. Just helps giving the song a bit character. I have these things following like the main rhythm. Because that's sort of the absolute foundation groove. It's very, very basic, but just gives it some extra spark and makes it pop a bit more. This white noise is pretty interesting. I felt like it lacked some absolute in the middle mono sort of thing. So it's like panning slightly in between. I felt like it helped the lead move a bit more. It's very, very, very tiny, but it helps just a little bit. And this thing, just a tonal noise that goes in the root note of the key. I'm sorry if I'm a bit slow today, I'm getting a bit sick, but I'm doing my best. As I said, in the root note. And it just helps gluing the track together. It's very, very low in the mix though. And we have some crowd noise, which does the same thing, glue everything together. It's quite loud here because the sounds are so massive, so just fit. I felt like the bass didn't stand out enough, so I added these layers. With even more white noise. There's so much white noise. But instead of having like one white noise, I focus more on giving the lead more white noise because that just makes it easier to listen to, in my opinion. We have one to each side and we have this. So the bass thing is this. It's just a preset black mask from the basic Serum packs. Doesn't really sound good on its own. This is the main bass without, and then with. Just added some grit to it that I liked. We have a little crash, which is automated the sidechain so that the sidechain comes in. So you get the impact, but you also glue it in the mix. These automations make sure of the pitching so that it goes of the lead and the sub, which really helps make the track and melody a bit more interesting, I think. But before I forget, the melody is obviously the most important thing of this track, and what really helps it is that the chords switch it up towards the end of the drop. So this is how it goes usually. And then again, and then again. But on the last part, it switches up. Which makes the track flow a lot better and gives it some evolution instead of just keeping it straight on that beat. That's pretty much the basics of the drop. There's a lot more to talk about in the breaks, but in the second half, we have the vocal coming in. And I actually ended up skipping this thing. I have it in the breaks, in the vocal, but in the drop it just felt a bit too cluttered. And I like it though, but it just made it a bit too messy, and sometimes you have to choose messy versus cool. Unmessy, or non-messy, I don't know. But the vocal comes in anyway over the half. Over the second half of the drop with some additional elements. But regarding the vocal, I think I'm gonna do a whole video on vocal mixing where I go through what I did with the vocal here in the next episode, so I'm not gonna go into it here. Let me know if you guys want that. But I think I will stick to that for now. So I've just muted the vocals, but in the second half we have rides coming in that are slightly pitching up. Hi-hats from my dippy dip actually. They don't really fit, I think, but sort of does. Anyways, I have this thing. It's a little woo! But the main elements of the second drop, except the vocal of course, are these things. They add that haunting feeling that you have going through the entire track and really helped glue the breaks together. This is how it sounds without any effects. So it's actually pitched up as well. This is how it sounds. So that sound, and then pitched up. And then with just a lot of reverb, Echo Boy, with some haunting sort of delays. Sounds like this. And just a pretty regular perk. That's how it sounds. And then with. So it just keeps on moving and grooving. That's the main part of the second half of the drop. There are a few things I think I've forgotten. These, just big snares. Right before the drop, these. Bass growls. Just add some extra punch. This one, it's in here as well. Automate it a bit. Little clock in the background here, which I have in the verses as well, just to glue everything a bit together. A riser. And that's pretty much it for the drop. I wish I could explain more of the leads and the bass, but sadly it's gone. So I'm gonna jump into the break now, because there's quite a lot of stuff to talk about there. I'm actually gonna mute the vocals for now and just focus on the instrumental. So the break sounds like this without vocal. It sounds pretty simple, but there are a lot of small automations and stuff that make it work, in my opinion at least. These are, I don't know why I have these. They're not playing the right chords, but oh, they kind of work actually. They give it some character at least. Okay, let's play this. So this is a pad from Trillion. With a lot of EQs on it. I think they're pretty much just for automation purposes, just to fit it perfectly in. It's even has some reverb on it. It just plays a very basic note, and this thing is more interesting. It's from Signal Contact. This is how it sounds without any effects. Actually sounds better without effects. I just ruined it. But these two are pretty much just automating up and down and cutoff and stuff like that, just to have it moving. I have this thing, which is actually that pad. Okay, this is a pretty nice trick actually, because I've rendered it out and then I've cut it up. So to add some groove into it and have it low in the background, it just adds a little something. I don't know if you guys can hear it, but this is without. And then with. It's very slight, but it adds just some groove and makes it not sit so still, because I felt like it was a bit too stale and didn't really flow anywhere. It's a bit distorted, pitching up and down a bit. And I've added a lot of attack, and it's a pretty nice trick that you can try out for yourself. Okay, so we have even more bass pads. These are to either side. This is one. And then the other one. They're slightly different, but they work together. They're in the same bus. Again, just decapitator, reverb, just the usual stuff really. And I have some pitching going on as well to match everything else. Okay, so this is probably the most important thing in the break. It's a pluck thing from Signal as well. This is how it sounds without effects. Just took up too much space because we have a lot of bass pads going in the middle, so just took out a lot of lows and mids. Just made sure it sits on top of the bass pads. It's sort of a supporting melody, but it works really well in keeping things flowing and going. Also, I've rendered out all the bass pads and pitched them up 12 to either sides, just to add some width and some ambience and yeah, and some higher elements that just sort of work. And we have this, as I spoke about in the drop. Goes through the entire drop, so you have some instant character. I have this as well. Just lots of small effects that you can't really hear, but it just makes it a bit more interesting to the ear. We have reverses. Lots of them. That's the first part of the verse, and then we go into the second, where the sub comes in, which sounds like this. which is also being automated, like flowing sort of a Reese sounding sub thing. I think I have 2 layers. It's just one that is a sub from Trillion. Sounds like this. It's a pretty clean thing. And then I have this thing, which is sort of like a drony, Reese-y sort of sound. In the second part, I also bring in some rhythm elements, these things. A little white noise, some snaps. That's Jace actually from a few of the music videos. Just his snaps are really good, so I recorded them. A snare pitching up, sounding like a cowbell. Pretty simple 808 clap. And another cowbelly sounding thing. Then the extra layers of the clap from the drop, just to make it sound glued. And this is actually pretty important, because what I did in the second part here, when the sub comes in, I also add the chords, because we haven't had any chords yet. Just instantly bringing in these elements as you go, like not having any chords in the first half and then bringing in sub and then bringing in chords and then rhythm elements. You have a lot to play with in bringing an evolution to your songs that can help just not giving everything away at once. It's so low that you can't really hear it, but it adds some melodic, subconscious depth to the song, if you will. And then we go into this pretty contrasting part, because the arrangement of this song is a bit weird. I've never done a break like this before, but it felt like it worked with the vocal at least. And it goes into this pretty epic part with like lots of distortion, impacts, and sub. Reverses into pretty much nothing, and then it comes back in again. Just found it a bit funny and it fit well, so I thought why not just do that. So there are lots of things going on here. We have this from the previous verse. Just the drum pad, the sub, and the signal pluck thing. This is just lots of cinematic stuff. It's a bit of a horn. Oh yeah, and we keep the rhythm elements so that it is like very separated rhythm-wise, but it still moves. So that's pretty important to make that part work, I think. This one as well. I think I even have 2 of these. Just lots of stuff. Don't really fit well together, but when it's so much, it just fits. And this is a bit funny, because this is my voice. So it sounds. Just from an all pop song I made. It's just. I added some vocodecs to it to make it dark. Yeah, just a robot thing and keeping it on one note, which sort of gave it some funny character. Because it pitches down. It sort of pitches down into. And everything is automated so that cuts off here. I have this. Without it, it sounds. But with just this tiny thing, can make a whole lot of difference. In the B part, in the response to the call, pretty much, just some pretty standard plucks that I felt worked. I think it's actually the same pluck that we used in Riot for the main lead. That's how it sounds without any effects. And I have bit speak, lots of reverb, some echo boy, and some automation of the pitch. And right before the next part, we have melody. And that thing, like, continues and helps glue everything together. And another impact stuff, little kick, just add some groove. And that repeats 2 times with the vocal changing and going into. Where finally the main melody is introduced. Alongside some rides starting to pitch up, and like the tension is building very, very fast. So it's a pretty efficient arrangement. There's a lot of things happening very fast, which I think is important to make it not sound too boring. So for a while the melody plays by itself. And then to just help the arrangement, keep the evolution going, the second half of the vocal comes into and introduces sort of the build-up. It's a pretty simple, short build-up, but I feel like it sort of works. I just stay at that one note and let the vocal take over sort of what you're hearing. So that's also one thing that I think is very important, that you have one main focus. So here we have the synth. That melody is the main focus, that's what you're listening to, and then that takes the backseat to the vocal so that the vocal can shine properly. And I just have some snares. She's pitching up, very standard stuff. Snares for my dip, some risers. It's a very simple track, but I think that the main key takeaways that you can take from the project, I think, is always have one thing to focus on in the track, and that you think of how you sparse out the elements so that you have an evolution in the track. So for instance, I start off with the vocal and then just the pads, and then we go into like having the chords there. We introduce rhythm elements, and then suddenly we have an absolute contrast with the A and B call and response, and then we go into the main melody, and then we go into the vocal again, into the build-up, and then the drop. It's a lengthy explanation. I think he just farted, so yeah, I'm gonna get him down and continue. Oh, that smells. So I think that's pretty much it for that part of the drop. I'm gonna go into the second verse because I switch it up a bit there to keep things interesting. The drop ends like this. Here I didn't want to lose the drive and the energy from the drop, but I didn't want to go into 4/4 kicks either, because that would just be too much in my opinion. I tried it and it just sounded too tiring to the ear. So I did like a half tempo sort of thing. Still have the 4/4 beat going, but instead of a kick on every 4, I have an 808 sort of sound with the vocal having a radio filter sound to it with like a short slap delay, so it sounds I used the Tïesto and Kashmir track Secrets as reference because that vocal has sort of the same feel to it here. I like the short slap delay and the radio filter. So again, try and listen to other songs to get ideas for what you want to do with the arrangement of the track, because that can be a very good idea. It's a pretty heavy 808 actually, but it sort of worked. I think I spent a lot of time finding the right samples, but I have that, which sounds like this without effects. It's very heavy, so distorted it a bit and took out some of the lows because it was just too much. Added this kick. That's how it sounds without. Now with. Just specified it a bit and they fit well together in my opinion. That was just finding the right sample that sounds right. And I remember I spent a couple hours trying to find just the right kick, and then pitched it to the right key and then stretched it to be the right like length and everything. So that's the most important part. I didn't even do anything on the mixer channel, so it was just about finding the right sample. The good thing here was that I had all the elements from the previous verse or the first verse, so I just had the clock going. I have all the reverses and these, even though it's not the same thing, it's like it gives the track familiarity. I mean, I don't know how you say that. You get what I'm saying. Just makes it sound familiar. I actually have this thing going, which is chords. Very simple stuff, but which sort of plays the rhythm of the bass and melody. And then of course the vocal, which I'm gonna go into probably next week. Depends if you guys want that. And the fun thing with the vocal is that in this part I actually used one of the harmonies that we recorded as the main lead. So it's a bit different melody as well, so that keeps it interesting, and it ends with like risers going into, and that is something I thought was a bit fun, because it's like this epic moment. It's just like, and then the vocal comes in with even louder harmonies and everything. It's something I'd never done before either. So arrangement wise, I had a lot of fun on this track. And big shout out to Brooks for starting the song with me. That was a lot of fun as always. And I think that was pretty much it. Please leave me any questions if you have them. Remember, I'm so excited to listen to all your remixes, so I can't wait to listen to those. I think you have like 2-3 weeks or something. Links in the description. I hope you liked the video. Please like it if you did. Comment something about my face that you don't like. Show it to your family, your friends, and I'll see you guys next week.